Losing a job is never just about losing a job. For most of us, what we do is bound up in who we are. Our role, our industry, our title, they become part of how we introduce ourselves, how we measure our worth, how we make sense of our place in the world. I'm Claudia Gasson, and this is What Do You Do? My guest today is Chrys Gerokonstantis, an organizational psychologist who has spent his career studying how personality shapes the way we navigate change, how we cope with uncertainty, how we build resilience, and crucially, how we find our way through a transition rather than just surviving it. In this conversation, we get into the psychology of career change at a deeper level than most, what your personality traits actually mean for how you handle loss, disruption, and reinvention, and what you can do with that knowledge to move forward with more intention. Well, Chrys, an absolute pleasure to have you on the What Do You Do podcast today. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here, Claudia. Yeah.
So without further ado, I would love it if you could just share a little bit more about who you are, what your background is, and what you do for a living for someone who maybe doesn't understand what a business psychologist is.
Yeah. Let me take it a bit, starting from the beginning, from the beginning of the journey. I was a really sporty kid when I was growing up. I grew up in Athens. I'm originally from Greek. You can tell from my accent as well. I used to play lots of basketball. And then I somehow moved to study economics. I did a major in economics. I moved to London with a couple of suitcases, I remember. And I started working in sales. So, started in a sales job in the center of London and then moved to consulting and psychology the last decade or so.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, many small steps leading to a bigger transition generally, from sports to consulting and psychology. Yeah. So currently I'm an organizational psychologist by background and senior consultant for Aware. Aware is a talent management consultancy, and we're an authorized distributor of Hogan in the UK, Italy, and France. So mainly we support organizations with their selection, development, succession, and promotion needs and requirements. So I'm doing lots of work with senior leaders to develop this strategic self-awareness so we can de-risk leadership decision quality more broadly.
I'm really interested about the transitions that you've made because obviously What Do You Do is all about career transition. We're a psychology-led career transition platform. So talk to me. You've obviously done a few from economics to consulting to becoming a psychologist. What has driven those transitions? Has it been a personal need? Has it been a economic issue? Or talk me through it.
This is a really good question. I think mainly was natural curiosity. So I was always curious. I was always imaginative. I was always thinking about thinking, just thinking stuff and imagining. So it was that natural curiosity to understand a bit more about the world and the perceptions of people from different culture, different personalities, different religions that led me to move to London. So natural curiosity, and of course, I would say, trying to create an identity, not only work-wise, but also as a human being. So these two things mainly in the beginning, and developing an identity. Yeah.
Mm, interesting. Because I know that obviously the work that you do is it's understanding personalities by doing Hogan assessments, that's all
Yeah.
personality profiling, etc. And so I find that very interesting. I know that some of the work that you've been doing is related to working with senior people in organizations. I guess we're seeing across the world at the moment quite a lot of changes through redundancies and AI displacement and things like that. But what does that actually do to a person psychologically? Because if you're doing these assessments, do people change as a result of, do you see changes in people taking an assessment before and after these changes? I'd be really curious to know that.
Generally, as you said, we're living in a very volatile environment. Geopolitically, economically, there's lots of transformation with AI. All these factors are influencing people at work. So now, and let's say this year, what we observe is when people lose their job, is not only a rupture, financial rupture, it's a rupture for the self-worth, for the social status. We see people working in jobs for 2-3 decades. So they're going through a massive crisis of identity. Um, Others may perceive that as, this is only economics and financial uncertainty. You'll find something else. This is what we're hearing, yeah? But it's much more than that. The impact on them is psychological, is social, and sometimes, if it persists, it could also be physical. We see people,
Mhm.
getting back from injury or illness
Mhm.
because of psychological stress,
Mhm.
chronic stress as well.
Yep.
Um, it's not the same like it was probably a few decades ago. People now, if they lose a job, they have a big challenge to face. And of course, adversity.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was actually watching The Devil Wears Prada 2 yesterday, and the whole theme is throughout the movie is about restructuring. So the magazine that Anne Hathaway works for goes through, they just lay off everyone at an event by a text message. And she then proceeds to do a whole speech around how it affects people on such a deeper level of like their all of a sudden their income has gone and they've got to support a family and they have like they've been working for an esteemed business where their identity is completely held around that. And also they might have children to provide for. And then what happens then? I think it's really hard for people obviously going through those experiences. Um, does personality affect how people are affected by these specific events within people's careers? Does resilience have a factor? Talk me through that.
It does. Before we, dive into the personality and characteristic traits, there's another thing with detachment of our work identity and attachment, really. So, attachment of our work identity. So, the level of the attachment we have will also affect a job loss. One tip for the listeners is to think about how attached they are with their job. And I think it's wrong that I'm saying their job. I mean, a job is much better. It's not their job. And think about themselves as a self directed project rather than having a job. Because if you lose that, you could collapse if you're very attached to your job. Now, going to personality and how much that it influences how we respond. So it's more about how your profile comes up when you're facing fear or challenge or uncertainty, because job loss could create pressure or stress or both. And these are two elements that when you face them, you will probably derail your behavior. You will derail. Yeah. So let's take an example of one trait. The Big Five model is quite popular. Is very well known
Yeah.
in the business context. So the Big Five, which is openness, extraversion, conscientiousness, neuroticism, and agreeableness.
Hmm.
Let's take the example of neuroticism, and someone with high neuroticism loses their job. They could be very emotionally reactive.
And just before we get
Yeah,
into that,
yeah,
we just are you able to define what neuroticism really looks like so people
yeah,
can
sure.
identify with it?
Yeah, one definition is, emotional reactivity, how sensitive we are with our emotions and how well we regulate our emotions. So if someone has high neuroticism and very emotionally reactive under pressure and uncertainty, it will be very damaging to their psychological well-being. Now, if someone has low neuroticism and they're generally, they can adjust, they can adapt. They're cool, calm, and collected under storms. This could be, much better for the psychological well-being, but they're also, you know, they're two sides of the same coin. So someone with a low neuroticism could not be very urgent and find and grab an opportunity. Yeah, they may, just be relaxed and stay for a little bit more in that state. Traits can have advantages and disadvantages. There is not bad or wrong trait, just for the listeners. It depends on how we manage it and how self-aware we are. about the trait. So if someone is self-aware about their neuroticism, they will be able to manage it more effectively under pressure. And
Mm,
this is the key there. Yeah.
mm,
So when someone is facing a job loss, yeah, redundancy, huge career transition, there is an association with openness.
mhm,
It doesn't mean it will change their personality because personality remains generally stable, but it may influence how open they are to feelings, ideas, other people, going forward. Now, there are many correlations between the traits and job loss. One other is conscientiousness.
mhm,
And conscientiousness is competence, is responsibility, is about goal setting. So someone with high conscientiousness, when they face, redundancy or they lose a job, they may struggle because these are the goal setters. They will take it very seriously. They take their identity very seriously. They're very attached to it and goal setting, and that could be also challenging for them.
mm,
There's not one trait. If we imagine that is, a strongest predictor there or a stronger association, but we have to look at the person a bit more holistically and how also they think about themselves, not only their reputation, yeah, and also to understand that we're of many minds. We're not just black. We're not black or white. Yeah, we're
mm.
colorful as human beings. Yeah.
So, would you say someone with high openness, when faced with redundancy, could maybe see it as an opportunity to try something new or do a career pivot?
Yes, for sure could be more creative. They could see it as a relief.
Hmm.
We hear from people's stories on LinkedIn. They're losing their job, and this is the best thing that happened to them.
Yeah, it's an
And they have not
opportunity.
even, yeah, they have not even realized that. But also, the opposite could also be true that someone lose their job, and they have to become more open in
Hmm.
in experiencing different things.
Hmm.
And the great thing with self-awareness, because what we're trying to teach leaders and help them is strategic self-awareness.
Hmm.
Now, within the self-awareness space, it's very helpful to know a big part of yourself, a good enough part of yourself, but not be very attached to that. Leave some open room in your mind for exploration. Of course, accept your identity, but also because you never know what will you can become or evolve to. We see transitions like someone is a singer, they want to become a doctor, physician in their 40s, in the 50s, and this is the best thing that happened to them in their whole life. They found new meaning. So let's keep it a bit open. You have to be malleable and fluid with
Hmm.
with our self awareness. General, yeah.
So, if you have a senior leader who comes to you and is looking to do a redundancy round, and they are working with HR to tell them the news around the redundancy, how would you advise them based upon different personalities within the
Mm.
team to
Yeah.
to
Mm.
effectively manage that? Would you, like, if someone has done lots of personality assessments, would you tell them to refer to that in order to make soften the blow in certain different types of personality characteristics? Would you make sure that it's a bit more bespoke to each individual? I would hope so.
Yeah, it can be a little bit more bespoke. And let's say the example of neuroticism, because neuroticism is a really good example. Someone who is high in neuroticism, so they may have low adjustment. You may have to be a bit more tactful and diplomatic when you communicate something that is important to them. If someone is low in neuroticism, maybe you have to be a bit more direct because they may even realize what's going on. They need a bit more of a shock, direct shock to get the message.
But
If
surely
someone is is
that
is not,
that news is going to be quite shocking regardless. Like, oh, you've lost your job.
yeah,
You
it
know,
will.
like, that's not
Yeah,
great news, is it? Really?
yeah, yeah. But imagine this happening to someone who is highly neurotic, and someone is really direct with to them. They have to be more tactful. Now,
Mm,
in both situations, you have to be tactful because this is a life change situation for them. They may be caregivers, They may taking care of their parents, they may have kids, they may have pets, they may have friends that they're supporting.
Mhm.
In either case, you have to be tactful, but I'm not saying you have not to be tactful with people that are low in neuroticism or they can adjust, but you can adapt your style
Mm.
so your message comes a bit more thoughtful to their ears.
Yeah.
And sometimes people that are not neurotic at all, um, it's really difficult to listen.
Mhm.
Clarity helps with low neurotic people. Yeah.
Totally. And you need to take into account someone's personal circumstances always in order to be sensitive to their circumstance and also to understand how best you can support them as an HR or leader professional to ensure that it's a better experience for that person. Because it can be, we've seen there's research into redundancies and layoffs that it's the worst effect on depression and anxiety than any other event in someone's career. And I'm seeing people and talking to people who have they've gone through it 4 times or plus throughout their career. And I guess you can just draw from each experience. I know you'll probably have different circumstances each time because you might be early on in your career, then you might have a family, then you might have
Yeah.
be towards retirement, and then you're like, crap, am I going to find another job? So one thing that we touched on there a little bit obviously was depression and anxiety that is affected by the event of a redundancy. Now, it can obviously show up quite a lot in career transition. And people tend to frame that as a weakness. And I actually want to draw upon my personal experience here too, where, I was at a fork in the road with my career and didn't know what to do after running a recruitment agency for 4 years. And I got diagnosed with depression and anxiety. So I can totally relate to this. And that was I was probably running across like this, went down a peak. No, not a peak, a cliff, and then came back out again through trying a lot of self-discovery. But let's say someone's listening right now, they're in the thick of it. And how can they understand what's actually the best thing to do in order to pull themselves out of that from a psychology standpoint, but also from, a practical standpoint?
If someone is in the thick of a low mood or anxiety, they feel anxiety or depressive symptoms, first of all, they need to understand that this is not a weakness. And you said that a bit earlier.
Yeah.
This is not a weakness. Now, we need to also be careful not to pathologize someone in the workplace and talk a bit more about symptoms rather than disorders. This is really important because imagine anxiety and depressive symptoms are the equivalent of fever as a physical symptom. So it could be a symptom to a million of underlying causes from imbalance and uncertainty.
Other symptoms can you describe? I mean, I can talk from my own personal experience of very low energy, very low get up and go, to be honest. Very feeling like I'm walking through sludge was probably some of that. I think that kind of goes hand in hand with what I've already said. But what other, I guess, more clinical symptoms would you outline that related to obviously career transition?
There are many symptoms from that you see in a depression, behind a depression episode or anxiety episode. It could be their sleep could be unregulated. They could not sleep very well. Their interest may not be the interest they had before in their life. There is also a feeling of grief. It could be, staying away from their friends and their close relationships, avoid decision making, becoming a bit more skeptical with people. And of course, sometimes personality styles or personality disorders could show up as depressive symptoms. One example is with charisma. You can definitely see people that are charismatic, but they have this deflated charisma, deflated grandiosity, and deflated confidence that is associated with emptiness as well. That could show up as a depressive symptom.
I think that these symptoms could also be attributed towards burnout as well. So, what is the distinction between burnout and anxiety, depression related to career transition?
Burnout is a condition. Is classified as a condition, as a state, as a chronic exhaustion, avoidance of the job, and loss of interest, emotional exhaustion. So burnout is a state, and There are other predictors of burnout in the workplace that we observe generally. And I know a research project I did was actually exploring the predictors of burnout for people working from home. And there are, elements of loneliness, isolation, sedentary behavior, physical activity, and how supported people feel from the organization about their well-being. So these are some predictors of burnout. And of course, all these could be correlated with depressive symptoms or anxiety symptoms. Chronic burnout or chronic stress could lead to a depressive symptom. And as well as the predictors like being lonely, being sedentary, not eating very well if you work from home, or if you work in a hospital and it's a very difficult job, you work in an outpatient or inpatient. There are many, many factors. What we're saying for people that are working from home, they have invisible demands. So sedentarism is an invisible demand. Loneliness, just being with yourself and teams and everyone is working virtually, that could also influence, burnout.
But is there a point where someone needs clinical or therapeutic support rather than working with a career coach, for example? So obviously people come to us, they are going through a career transition, whether that's they've been in touch with us through their employer or they've come to us directly. But how do people know where that line is if they need more clinical or therapeutic support rather than just pure psychology career coaching?
So we have to draw the line very clearly in terms of functionality. So when someone is not functioning in their job, they can't take care of themselves, they can't think clearly, and these symptoms are persistent, then therapy might be suitable for them, not coaching. Coaching can be helpful for someone who is already functioning and they want to change, they want to achieve certain goals, but they're functioning from their perspective at a good enough level so they can be coached.
Yeah.
If they're not functioning, probably therapy could be more suitable.
The first port of call also is obviously to go to your GP and they will be able to assist you immediately. But I think, just in terms of safeguarding, we take a very serious stance around, if someone comes to us from a career transition and they are experiencing redundancy and it's really affecting their self-esteem and ability to function, we do recommend that we take it offline and we ensure that we can give as much support as possible in that scenario. So just an FYI, it's taken very seriously with all of our coaches and they're all trained to handle that scenario too. And we also have mental health first aiders too to be on hand as part of our team to ensure that we are there to facilitate and help anyone going through any issues related to work or otherwise. Well, Chrys, it's been an absolute pleasure to have a chat with you today about everything covering, mental health, career transitions, personality types. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, my pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Thanks so much. If today's conversation resonated with you, here's where to go next. If you're navigating redundancy or a career change and you're not quite sure what comes next, head to whatdoyoudo.com. You can take our AI career assessment, explore our coaching packages, or join a community of people who get exactly what you're going through. If you're an HR leader or people team supporting colleagues through redundancy or restructure, we work with organisations too. Find out about our outplacement support at whatdoyoudo.com. And if you love this episode, please leave us a review, share it with someone who really needs it, and come and find me on LinkedIn. I'm Claudia Gasson. I'll see you on the next episode.